I'll be honest, y'all. I think I picked this fact of the day because it was something that I get really excited about. I've always loved stories set during what's called the Age of Sail, with wooden sailing ships battling against one another, the roar of cannon fire, and the smell of gunpowder all around. Anyway, I grew up reading some really cool book series set during this time period. And while all of these books are fictional, it's amazing how much of the most awesome stuff from these books is based on the actual adventures of one very real person, Thomas Cochrane. He was a captain in the British Navy during the Napoleonic Wars and was so good at what he did that Napoleon himself gave him the nickname La Loup de Mer, the Wolf of the Sea. He is very much one of those people where when you stop to read about some of the things he did, it seems totally fake, like it couldn't have possibly happened. But, you know, that's one of my favorite parts of Facts of the Day. I get to tell stories, and no one can go, that's so unrealistic, because every bit of this actually happened. In any event, let's get to some storytelling. As our story opens, Cochrane was in command of a British sloop of war called the HMS Speedy. He had been given orders to go capture or destroy enemy shipping, and he had been having a grand old time. During this cruise, he would capture, burn, or drive ashore 53 separate ships. One important thing to know about naval war of this era is that you always tried to capture enemy ships, not sink them, because if you brought a usable ship back to base, that ship and everything on it would be auctioned off, with the money then divided up between all the people who helped to capture it. As you might expect, the captain got the biggest share of the money, and Cochrane was set to come out of this cruise a very wealthy man. Then, in the spring of 1801, we come to one of the most famous ship to ship battles in all of history. The literal title of this fact of the day is The Action of the 6th of May, 1801, which is, today. More specifically, this was a small sea battle between the British ship HMS Speedy, under the command of Captain Thomas Cochrane, and the Spanish ship El Gamo. Right off the bat, you may notice that there was a bit of a size difference, with El Gamo being about 4 times bigger. But that's not all. While El Gamo had a full crew of about 319 men on board, the Speedy only carried 90 men. Wait, wait, hold on a second. Actually, because Captain Cochrane had been capturing so many other ships, he had to send off some of his sailors to sail those back to base, so the Speedy was actually down to only 54 men. Oh, that's not good. Well, what about cannons? El Gamo had the edge there too, with 32 cannons compared to the Speedy's 14. Just hearing those numbers, though, doesn't really tell the whole story. See, not all cannons are created equal, and the easy way to measure how powerful it is to describe it by how heavy a cannonball it can shoot. So, instead of saying that El Gamo had 32 cannons, we could instead say that it had 22 12-pounders, 8 9-pounders, and two 24-pound carronades. As for the HMS Speedy, well, unfortunately, its guns could only fire 4-pound cannonballs. So really, El Gamo had about 7 times the firing power of poor little Speedy. So, the stage is set. El Gamo has 4 times the size, 6 times the manpower, and 7 times the firing power. What did the Speedy have? Well, they had Thomas Cochrane. The odds are just about even. It was 9:30 in the morning, and both ships had sighted one another. The Spanish ship sailed straight at the smaller vessel, and Cochrane knew there was no escape, because in addition to all those other advantages, the Spanish ship was also faster than his. So what did he do? Surrender? Beg for mercy? Nah, he sailed straight at them. Then, despite being a British ship, he raised an American flag. See, back then, the rules of war said it was okay to put up a false flag as long as you raised your real flag before you started firing. The Spanish weren't sure if it was a trick, but they didn't want to accidentally fire on an American ship because they didn't want America joining the British in this war. Besides, if that tiny ship was an enemy, why was it still sailing right at oh snap? When he judged the moment right, Cochrane cut down the American flag and replaced it with the British one. In their surprise, the Spanish rushed to fire a broadside of thundering destruction that would obliterate this little pipsqueak of a ship. But Cochrane had already started turning his ship in the direction they least suspected, and their hurried cannon fire missed by a wide margin. Cochrane had turned his ship and pulled in so close that their sails were bumping into each other. He had loaded each of his cannons with double and triple cannonballs each, and he started firing into them. Now, you might be wondering, why don't the Spanish just fire back and obliterate him? Well, take a look. Here's their line of cannons. Their cannons were up so high that all they could do was shoot little holes in the smaller ship's sails. They couldn't be aimed downwards to hit the ship or the people in it. Cochrane kept shooting at their ship, so the Spanish decided, well, that's fine. If we can't shoot you with cannons, we'll just charge onto your ship and fight it out hand to hand. They gathered their crew to board the enemy, and just before they were ready, Cochrane sailed away and started firing his cannons at the Spanish sailors who were all crowded together like one big target. The Spanish quickly dispersed, and Cochrane sailed right back into his safe firing spot. This process repeated itself again and again. The Spanish would gather to board, Cochrane would fall back and shoot at the easy target, then zip back to his safe space before they could retaliate. The thing is, though, the little bitty cannons Cochrane had couldn't sink the Spanish ship. It was kind of like shooting at a car with a BB gun. Sure, technically you were doing some damage, and the person who owns the car is going to be really mad at you, but the car probably isn't going to blow up from your BB gun shots. He was kind of like the dog who actually caught the car he was chasing. What did he do now? Did Cochrane give up? Did he offer to have both sides go home and call it even? No. Cochrane did what Cochrane always did. He attacked. Leaving only the ship's doctor behind to steer the ship, he had half of his men rub soot onto their faces, as pirates often did. The Spanish had already lost their captain to cannon fire and were reeling in confusion. The Spanish expected an attack from the middle of the ship, but Cochrane had his own brother lead the first attack up at the bow or front of the ship. As the Spanish responded to that attack, Thomas Cochrane himself led an attack on the middle where the Spanish had just left. The battle was all chaos and confusion on the deck of the Spanish ship. The British were still outnumbered by more than 5-1 when Cochrane pulled his final two tricks. First, he sent his best set of fighters over to the mainmast with orders to cut down the Spanish flag, and then Cochrane shouted to the doctor, who you'll remember is all by himself over on the Speedy, "Send over the rest of the men!" As the Spanish sailors saw their flag falling from the mainmast, they thought their officers had already surrendered, and hearing that more men were coming, the crew of El Gamo threw down their weapons and surrendered. When the dust settled, the 54 men under Thomas Cochrane had, at a cost of 3 dead and 9 wounded on their side, killed 14, wounded 41, captured 261, and captured that much bigger ship pretty much completely intact. The Spanish officer in charge even asked Cochrane to write him an excuse note, explaining that it wasn't his fault that he had lost the battle to such a much smaller ship, so that he wouldn't get in trouble whenever he made it back to Spain. There we go. I hope you found this interesting. If you enjoyed it, I highly recommend C.S. Forster's Horatio Hornblower books and the series of TV movies based on them. The books may be a bit advanced for middle school, but there's still something to keep in mind for the future. We're near the home stretch for the school year, y'all, so don't start falling down on me now. I'll see you next time. And until then, stay safe and stay healthy.